You are now watching Surveillance. Donate or subscribe for more sick twists.
Hey guys, how's it going? We're just gonna make another quick Phase 3 boss guide video. A lot of stuff has changed. You know, WarcraftLogs, they changed the way Anub works, and some of our strategies have kind of evolved, so I'm gonna make this video a lot shorter than the last one, and we're just gonna blast through all the strategies and how they've changed. So let's get started. And once again, if you guys want to find any of this information, anything that gets changed or gets updated in the future, all that stuff is going to be updated into the document, Phase 3 document, aka boss guide. You can find that in the description. That'll always be up to date, so you can always use that as your reference. I usually like to just have it open while I'm raiding. So anyways, let's get started. And once again, a big thanks to all my patrons who support the channel. If you guys want to support the channel, check out the Patreon down below or subscribe. Now, for pretty much every fight in TOGC, we are going to recommend Aura Mastery spec, because there's really no fight that Divine Sacrifice is going to be really any better than Aura Mastery. And there are even mechanics where Aura Mastery will work, but Divine Sacrifice will not, such as the silence on faction champions. There just really isn't any reason anymore to take the 300 DPS or so loss in order to have Divine Sacrifice. This also means that you'll be able to get more flavor talents like Vindication, Improved Blessing of Might, Divine Purpose. Alright, so just a real quick rundown of the glyphs. When we say standard glyphs, what we mean is Judgment, Reckoning, and then one of the three: Exorcism, Seal of Vengeance, or Consecrate. Now, typically it's going to be Exorcism in Phase 3. It could also be Seal of Vengeance if you're still in the process of gearing up, but it's probably not going to be Consecration for now, unless maybe, and we'll talk about this later, you might want to use it on a noob. Exorcism tends to be about 15 DPS better than Consecration, regardless of the mob type. Consecration's main value comes from opening up the rotation, which is a bigger deal when you seal swap a lot, such as a noob. Now, a noob is probably the only fight where Consecration is going to have a recommendation. Otherwise, it's going to come down to Exorcism or Seal of Vengeance. When you have enough expertise from all the great expertise gear in Phase 3, then you can drop the Seal of Vengeance glyph for Exorcism and still be passively capped on both cleave and single target. And this is ideal. This is what we are aiming for, because the expertise cap is very important on cleave. So if you run the Seal of Vengeance glyph, you're just never going to be capped on cleave. And for a fight with mixed cleave like Anub or Jaraxxus, that's really going to hurt you. Avenging Wrath glyph just doesn't seem to be very good for a few reasons. Like, for example, on Twin Val'kyr, you could maybe get it to be like a 10 DPS gain on the sim at the perfect kill time, 145 seconds. But if it's much longer or much shorter than that, EXO is better. So you're kind of gambling for a very, very small potential gain. In my opinion, it's just not worth using. I'll leave it up to you guys, but for the most part, it doesn't seem to work on any fight. Alright, so we are starting with Beasts of Northrend. Okay, so standard glyphs, starting with Seal of Vengeance, getting our Libram going. Now, it can vary a lot when he decides to drop the snowbolts, so going Seal of Command is going to be something you're going to have to kind of go at your own discretion. Now, I think if there's only one snowbolt in the boss, the seal you're in doesn't really matter a whole lot, but I think if there's more than one snowbolt, then you should definitely go Command. The very top parses are kind of split between Command and Vengeance. Last I checked, there's plenty of parses doing both. Just kind of depends how the encounter shakes out for you. Also, if you're going to save your wings to cleave on snowbolts, well, it's going to depend if the boss decides to drop a bunch of snowbolts. You cannot cleave the snowbolts with Divine Storm or Consecrate, so Seal of Command is the only way to cleave them. You should cleave off of the boss for the most possible damage, since he has full debuffs. Now, if there's only one snowbolt and you decide to say Seal of Vengeance, then you'll do more damage hitting the boss and ignoring the snowbolts, but you won't be able to do any damage to them because your Divine Storm and Consecrate just can't hit them. So you may need to target them just to help kill them. Now, you can use Concentration Aura Mastery in order to prevent the Staggering Stomp silence from going out, but people can just range this anyway, so it's kind of a waste, and it's better to save for Phase 2. Try to keep your Libram of Valiance going, which I actually did a pretty bad job of here. When he dies, he will release all of the snowbolts that he still has. It's actually possible, too, for him to die without having released any snowbolts yet. So you end up getting all 4 of them at the end. Keep that in mind if you're going to try to save your wings for snowbolts. And there is about a 10-second intermission where you can clean them up. Okay, now on to Phase 2. To do the most possible damage here, you want to cleave both of these worms together like so. Now, the paralytic poison is a debuff that'll go out onto people. It'll slow them down periodically, and to clear it, you need to go find the person with the burning bile. Typically, the tank who is tanking Dreadscale will have it, and you just need to get close to them and take a tick of fire damage in order to clear the debuff. Now, before you run in front of Dreadscale to take a tick of fire damage, you need to make sure that he's not doing the Molten Spew, or you will just probably die. This is also a decent place to use your Nitro Boosts to get your Paralytic Poison cleansed, because if you don't get there fast enough, you will just become frozen in place, and they will have to come to you. Now, as everybody's running in to clear their Paralytic Poison and taking fire damage, this is the ideal time to use your Fire Resistance or a Mastery or Divine Sacrifice if for some reason you still have that. Now, you can also bubble it off, but you might want to be careful that it's not going to overlap your wings, because as you see here, I could have used my wings, but I bubbled instead, and it ended up costing me a lot of damage where I could have wings during the cleave. Other than that, all you need to do is make sure you stay out of the poison damage and stay away from the Molten Spew that Dreadscale will do occasionally. Also beware the threat drop when they emerge from the ground. Now, some guilds may be hesitant to cleave the worms because of the risk that it adds, but my guild did it this week, and it didn't really feel that much more dangerous, but I'll leave it up to you guys to decide whether that's a risk you guys want to take for the parse, or if you'd rather make 50 attempts that much safer for the cloak. So, on to Phase 3, Icehowl. Very easy phase, very straightforward. Now, as you can see here, I'm going to step back to max range melee distance, and I'm going to avoid getting knocked back, unlike other people in my raid. As long as you're completely max range, you should not get knocked back. Essentially, at this point, it is just a tank and spank until he decides to do his massive crash mechanic. Once he does his massive crash, he's going to push everybody back and stun everyone. So right before the stun goes out, you should use your Blessing of Protection or Hand of Protection on one of the casters. A Warlock, a Mage, maybe even like a Boomkin or a Shadow Priest. Try to keep their dots going, etc. Now, this is also where if you have the talent Divine Purpose as Aura Mastery, you can use your Blessing of Freedom or Hand of Freedom to get yourself or somebody else out of the stun to do more damage. Just make sure you don't get hit by the crash. And then he's going to pick a target and charge straight at them towards the wall. If that person gets out of the way, he will charge all the way into the wall, stun himself, and he will take double damage for a period of time. If you don't get out of the way and somebody gets hit by the massive crash charge, then he will enrage and probably just wipe your raid. Unless you're in normal mode, you cannot tranquilize or use anesthetic poison on it. That's only in normal mode, not in heroic. So if that happens, you're probably just going to wipe. Now, right after he crashes into the wall is the best time to use your final wings when the boss is taking double damage. Now, hopefully it lines up properly for you. Mine, as you can see here, did not, because I used my wings at the wrong time in the end of Phase 2 instead of at the beginning of Phase 2 with the cleaving. And that was all because I decided to bubble, which was a bad move. Otherwise, I would have used my wings on the cleave in Phase 2 and right here on the massive crash double damage, which would have been pretty ideal. Now, if your guild's kill time is really fast, you may need to skip the wings in the middle of Phase 2. Okay, now we're on to the second boss, Lord Jaraxxus. Once again, we're going to be using standard Glyphs, and we're going to be using Seal of Vengeance for the most part. If you do a lot of seal swapping here, then Glyph of Consecration could be a possible option for your third Glyph, but personally, I'm not a huge fan of it outside of a noob. So we will begin the fight stacking up our Seal of Vengeance debuffs on the boss, getting our Libram buff going. Now, there is the potential to desync your trinkets here so that your trinkets do not proc until the ads spawn and you go into Seal of Command. To desync your trinkets, all you need to do is switch the slots they are in, and then your trinkets will automatically go on cooldown. So if you want to save your trinkets for the cleave, then all you need to do is simply swap your trinkets at 25 seconds before the combat starts, in which case you'll probably also want to save your wings for that. Now, this could be a bad strategy if the ads die very quickly in your raid, which is the case for a lot of really high-end raids. The faster these ads die, the less worth it is for you to go into Seal of Command and cleave them down. Now, this also leads to some unfortunate parse mechanics where if you let the portals stay alive for longer than you normally would, and you allow them to spawn more ads, you might be able to parse better just by having more mobs to cleave, which is kind of messed up. But that is the sad nature of any of these unrestricted cleave fights that have ad spawning mechanics like this. Now, what we are doing here is called the door strategy. It's where you put Lord Jaraxxus next to the door, and the ads as well as the portals will always spawn to the left of him, so they will all kind of be in the same area and easy to cleave. Now, as you guys are seal swapping, be sure that you don't go too low on mana. And if you do get low on mana, start cutting out Holy Wrath and start judging more. As far as your Aura Mastery goes, what I like to do is, as soon as the first Mistress of Pain spawns, use Concentration Aura Mastery, because they do have a silence mechanic. That's pretty much the only thing to use Aura Mastery on here. You can also do like a Fire Resistance Aura Mastery, but in my opinion, it's just not really necessary. So yeah, I mean, that's basically the whole fight. Let's move on. So Faction Champions doesn't count on the logs, so it's really not a big deal here. As far as glyphs go, standard glyphs, but you probably do not want to use Seal of Vengeance glyph here, because you're probably going to spend most of this encounter in Seal of Command. Now, this is also one fight where you may want to use your PvP Libram. It's probably the only fight where you might want to use your PvP Libram, because you're going to spend most of the fight in Command. And once you go into Seal of Command, you're probably not going to come out for the rest of the fight. So alternatively, what you can do is, since most guilds grip out one of the mobs that they're going to focus down first, you can start with Seal of Vengeance and Libram of Valiance, focus down that mob, and then as the other ads come in, switch to Command, and then when your Libram falls off, switch to the PvP Libram as well. Now, these days, most guilds are just going to cleave everything and not really try to CC that much. I mean, CCing is good, especially the CCs that can't be broken, like Cyclone and stuff. But a lot of CCs are just going to break, and a lot of these mobs just aren't that dangerous, especially when they're not hitting the same person. So I use, right on the pool, I use Concentration Aura Mastery so that nobody gets silenced right out the gate, and then I will have my Holy Paladin chain his right after mine ends. Anytime a caster is getting blown up, or sometimes your DK, your Frost DK, when he spreads his diseases, all the ads are going to start hitting him, which is kind of something that I see happen all the time. If that happens, then you can use your bop to save people from that kind of thing. Anybody who's getting hit by multiple mobs probably needs a bop. Use your cleanse and dispel any fears, or wound poisons and novas and things like that, although you should be getting help from the priests with mass spells. Now, these mobs do have a buff where they take 75% reduced damage from area of effect attacks, but that actually only applies to Consecration and Sapper Charge. It will not affect your Seal of Command, and it will not affect your Divine Storm, so you can go ahead and cleave to your heart's desire. So because of all that, on this fight, Consecration is probably your lowest priority spell, because it does 75% reduced damage, and it's probably going to break CCs and stuff anyway. There's not really a lot of good places to lay it down unless you're just cleaving everything, so probably just use it as your lowest priority spell. You should also make sure that you are using your Repentance, your Hammer of Justice, and your Arcane Torrent to help kill these mobs, keep them close together for cleaving and that sort of thing, as well as interrupting heals. A lot of people, including myself included, don't use their Repent or their Hammer of Justice nearly as much as they should on this sort of fight. Now, it's a PvP fight after all, so those things are invaluable. So that's pretty much the whole fight. Use your utility, bot people, use freedom, dispel people, interrupt, stun, Arcane Torrent, use your Concentration Aura Mastery on the pull. And this fight doesn't really count on logs anyway, so just don't even worry about it too much. And just cleave to your heart's content. This is one of those fights where you actually can get pretty high on the damage meter, so enjoy that. And that's really all there is to say about this fight. Let's move on to Twin Val'kyrs. Okay, so for Twin Val'kyrs, as you guys I'm sure know at this point, you're going to want to get the Dark Essence and typically DPS the Lightbane Lady. To deal the most damage, your Essence needs to be the opposite of the type of mob you're hitting. So if you have Dark Essence, you need to hit Lightbane. If you have Light Essence, you need to hit Darkbane. This is once again a standard glyph fight, Seal of Vengeance, and Libram of Valiance encounter. Now, many people look at this fight and they think that it's a two-target fight, but it really should be treated as a single-target fight. The damage that you're going to deal to the off-target that is not your main target is only about 10% or 11% of your damage. That is because the main target takes increased damage and the off-target takes reduced damage. Now, this fight is based around the mechanic powering up, where Every time a dark orb comes into the raid and explodes, it'll give everybody a bunch of stacks of powering up, and if you reach 100 stacks, you'll get a buff called Empowerment that makes you deal double damage for about 15 seconds, which is kind of the whole core mechanic of the fight. And because of this mechanic, you're going to want your raid to be very, very, very tightly stacked. My guild right here is actually not even stacked as well as we should be. This is actually a pretty poor stack, so you guys want to be stacked so tightly that you're basically on top of each other, so that if somebody gets hit by an orb, everybody gets hit by an orb, and it's pretty important. Now, if you're a Dark Essence and you get hit by a light orb, you're going to take a lot of damage. So basically, you always have a couple people out in the ranged area eating up some of the light orbs, and they're going to have Light Essence instead of Dark Essence, so that they can eat up those light orbs and keep them away from the raid. Now, one of the reasons why guilds like to take off their Shadow Protection on this fight and Shadow Protection Aura is because if you resist the Dark Orb damage, you actually will get less stacks. If you fully resist it, you won't get any stacks. This means that as long as the raid is in Dark Essence, you will not want to be in Shadow Protection Aura. Instead, you can use Fire Protection Aura because the light orbs are going to be fire damage. So if the light orbs do hit the raid, then you can use Fire Protection Aura or Fire Totem or whatever to mitigate that damage. Now, if you get a Light Vortex, and she's going to do a bunch of light damage to the entire raid, then you typically have to swap to the Light Essence so that you don't die. Because whatever essence you are, you take less damage from that type. So if I have the Dark Essence, I'm taking less damage from the Dark type. That means that when the whole raid switches into Light Essence, in order to survive a Light Vortex, or in order to break a Twin Pact on the Darkbane mob, then that will be a good time to actually go into Shadow Resistance Aura and use your Aura Mastery. Because if any of those Dark Orbs that are normally coming into the raid come in while you guys are in the Light Essence, they'll actually do a ton of damage and they won't give you stacks. Now also, anytime you have to change to the Light Essence and then change back, you're going to want to use your Nitro Boosts to get the Dark Essence faster, because it's going to be somewhat far away. Additionally, you can avoid changing your Essence in the first place if you bubble the Light Vortex, but I think this actually might cost you some damage, because you're going to have to sit in the bubble for the duration of the Light Vortex to survive, and during that time you'll be doing half damage. So it's downtime while you go get your Dark Essence, versus sitting in a bubble and having half of your damage. Not to mention, using the bubble there might mess up, your final wings. CD timing is pretty straightforward, so you're going to want one of your wings to be whenever your guild lusts is when you're going to want to have one of your wings. Now, typically that's going to be on the pull, and so your second wings, if the fight goes long enough for that, can either be at the end of the fight or with your empowerment. Now, empowerment damage on the logs is normalized, so they're going to take whatever damage you do in empowerment, the double damage, and they're going to actually cut it in half. So using your wings with your empowerment does not help your personal DPS, but it will significantly speed up your kill time if you end up getting empowerment, because it is possible to do this fight and not get empowerment before the boss dies, unfortunately. So that pretty much covers Twin Val'kyrs. Let's move on to Anub'arak. So, Anub'arak, definitely the easiest boss to wipe on and lose your cape. Also, just probably the hardest boss to parse, because it takes a lot of finesse, and I'll get into that. So, this is going to be a fight where you could use Consecration Glyph, otherwise use the standard Glyphs. And that's because of seal swapping, a lot of seal swapping going on, so using the Consecration Glyph can save you GCDs and mana. Now, this whole fight, you need to think about how much you need to prioritize ad damage versus boss damage, because there is a 600k damage cap on the burrowers. So once you have done 600k damage to the burrowers, no more of that damage can end up on the logs. The rest of it will get thrown away. So doing things like desyncing your trinkets 25 seconds before the pull so that you have them up for the ads, or using your first wings on the first pack of ads can be a way to gain more DPS, but it can also hurt you if you would have hit the cap anyway before the end of the fight. So parsing on this fight is going to require knowing where you are with the cap. So if you see here in the right side of my screen, I have a weak aura that I will link in the description that will show you how much damage you have done to the ads so far, and that way you guys can know when you've hit 600k. Big thanks to Foji for making that weak aura. Now, you guys ideally want to hit 600k and hit that cap right as phase 3 is beginning, or right as that last pack of ads in phase 3 is dying. Now, hitting the cap actually isn't the most important thing in the world if you are in one of the top guilds in the world, like the top 40 raids that are like DK stacks. You actually could probably still parse a 99 or higher without hitting the cap, and I'll explain why. Because if you are one of these raids, you can actually one phase the boss by killing him so fast that you skip the entire submerge in phase 2, so that you have complete 100% uptime the whole way through the fight. Now, if you do that, you could probably still get a 99 or higher without hitting your 600k cap on the ads. So this is a fight where we're going to use Libram of Valiance, and we're going to try to keep it up anytime throughout the whole fight. Now, your Libram of Valiance can stay going up to 31 seconds after you switch into Seal of Command. So that's the goal here. Anytime the ads come, you're going to switch into Seal of Command. You're still going to have a bunch of time on Libram of Valiance. And then when your Libram of Valiance is about to fall, you can switch back into Seal of Vengeance to get it going again. Especially because this usually lines perfectly so that when the ads are dead, your Libram's about to fall off anyway. So you can switch back to single targeting the boss and get your Libram back up anyway while you wait for the next pack of ads. Do not worry about keeping 5 stacks of Seal of Vengeance going on the boss. You don't need to worry about that. That is way too much seal swapping. Just worry about your Libram buff. During phase 2 here, basically what you're going to do is you're going to use your Divine Plea, and you're going to put Seal of Vengeance up, and you're just going to melee Scarabs to try to keep your Libram going, and you're going to judge Scarabs to try to get your mana back. The ideal situation here is to get all your mana back before the boss comes back out of the ground, so that you have full mana going into phase 2 and phase 3. Just be sure to stay far away from his spikes and don't get hit by him. Also, you may need to bop somebody if you run out of ice patches or space, so keep that in mind. If you bop somebody, then they can survive standing on top of the spikes for a while. So because of all the seal swapping and because of the Holy Wrath usage, this is actually a very mana intensive fight. So because Judge is such a low priority spell while cleaving, you may actually need to ignore the normal priority and prioritize Judge a little bit higher while you're in Seal of Command, especially if you're following the weak aura, because if you Judge low priority, you probably might just go because of all the seal swapping. So that is something that you're going to have to watch. Make sure you use your Divine Plea early and often. Okay, so now that the boss has come back out, we've got a new set of ads. The boss is getting close to his 30% mark. This is where you need to decide, am I going to wings the ads here for more damage? Am I under the cap? Or am I going to save my wings to kill the boss? So typically what most guilds are going to do here is they're going to get this very last pack of ads very low or completely dead right when they push the boss, so that when they push the boss, all they have to deal with is the boss. And it's just only the boss hitting anybody. He's not going to heal as much, etc. Some guilds may even completely stop damage on the boss so that they can kill the next pack of ads that comes out. The only thing you need to beat is the submerge timer. You have to push the boss before the submerge timer. Now, Paladins also have an extremely important job on this fight of interrupting the Shadow Strike. We're one of the best classes at it because we can use Arcane Torrent if you're a Blood Elf, and your Holy Wrath. You know, you can stun all 4 of the ads at the same time to interrupt them all. Now, you should have backup interrupts, or at least, have your prop Paladin also do Holy Wrath, just in case you get a resist or something. But this is really a reliable way to interrupt the Shadow Strike on the ads. So you want to make sure that your Holy Wrath cooldown is going to be ready when the Shadow Strike's about to go out, if that's your job. Okay, so right when phase 3 is about to begin at 30%, you want somebody to use Divine Guardian to reduce the damage everybody's taking while they are still at high health. Because if you try to cast it after everybody's at low health, it's just going to instantly break and not help anybody. Also, if you are Aura Mastery spec, after 30%, you are going to want to use your Aura Mastery Frost Resistance Aura in order to reduce the amount of damage that the Penetrating Cold mechanic is dealing to random players in the raid. Now, there is a weak aura for that that can help you track the Penetrating Cold debuff. You want to use your Aura Mastery before the first tick goes out. If you don't, it's probably not going to help at all, from what I understand. You are also going to want to put Sacred Shield on yourself. Now, as you can see here, I didn't quite cap 600k on the ads here, so I could have added a little bit more cleave damage on the ads, used my wings maybe on the ads, that kind of thing. However, I am used to us getting another pack of ads before we push him, so I was kind of expecting another pack to come in that I would be able to cap off of. We ended up pushing the boss earlier instead, and that's all fine and dandy. I just used my wings instead on the boss, single target style. Now, going into phase 3, you are pretty much just going to want to single target the boss, because you should be either capped or very close to capped on the ads, and the boss damage is all that really matters at this point. The only reason to kill the ads here is if your tanks are taking too much damage and a noob is healing for too much. Once again, ideally you will be capped at this point. You can also force them to submerge like you see in the video we just did by keeping them off of the ice patch and just letting them cast their submerge. Just once again, thank you to all my patrons: Kanetian, Get On My Level, Kitty Exorcism, Athens, Juan 93A, Dark Knight, Neck Minute, Dylan F, and Gene T. By the way, Dylan and Gene, if you guys want to hit me up, if you have a different name you'd like for your shoutouts, please reach me on Patreon and we'll talk. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, everybody. Any of you other guys who want to support the channel, check out the description down below. Like, subscribe, whatever, do any of that stuff you want. Patreon, PayPal, that stuff's available down there. So some of the stuff you guys can look forward to is going to be a phase 4 document. That's in the works right now. Our ICC videos will be sometime in the next month or two. I also am probably going to be putting together a Shadowmourne video, and I'll probably also make a video on how we expect Ret to do in ICC, because a lot of people keep asking me that question. So I will take all the data we have so far, and I will try to elucidate how we expect Ret to do in ICC based on everything we have so far, the Hand of Reckoning buffs, the Seal of Vengeance changes, etc. So stay tuned for that, and I thank you guys for watching. I hope you appreciate the video. I updated most of the strategies, so I hope they're more accurate for you guys, and also the video is a lot shorter now, so hopefully that makes it easier to watch. So thank you guys again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.